Why do you think Putin's removed so many Russian leaders, military leaders? Because they've failed. And the reason they failed is because their leadership is horrible. Their training is horrible. Their doctrine is archaic. And so, you know, that's the answer to your question.
I would like also to get back to this Operation Spiderweb and its influence around the globe. How could this influence global nuclear deterrence and the security protocols on how do you protect your own strategic bombers?
Yeah, I know it's an excellent point. But, you know, the kinds of threats that that were demonstrated, the capabilities that were demonstrated in being able to reach out as you did on June 1st are really not new. Okay, the United States has recognized that it's faced these kinds of threats for decades, but the decisions have been made in the past that the threat, excuse me, the threat of this happening was low enough that investment in what we call force protection just simply wasn't necessary, and so therefore that investment was not made. I think what you see is a greater awareness of the potential vulnerability of not just air bases, but look at critical infrastructure. The Chinese had two of their Air Force officers write a book in 1999 that basically outlined their approach to how they might do this. It was called Unrestricted Warfare. You can go online and get a copy of the book, but so this is not new. It's just that your Spiderweb operation unveiled the reality of what can be accomplished. So, you know, there's been a realization of the vulnerability of bases for many, many years. If you go back to the Cold War era, if you look at NATO force protection, every single NATO air base, they house their fighters in hardened aircraft shelters. But since the end of the Cold War, people perceived, Western nations perceived that the threats were reduced. So again, there was less of a focus on the importance of force protection. Now with, you know, quadcopters with explosives that are essentially portable precision-guided munitions, that's a new means to accomplish these kinds of attacks, and that's put a lot more focus on the importance of force protection.
From your perspective, does the Golden Dome still make sense after this Operation Spiderweb?
Yes, but for a variety of different reasons. And, you know, people use the term Golden Dome, but frankly, it hasn't been completely defined. So people have different perspectives of just what it is. But one of the things that I think will endure regardless of how folks interpret whether the principal focus of Golden Dome is on ballistic missile defense or cruise missile defense or defense against drones and other means of attack, is the sensor layer. It's extraordinarily important from a U.S. perspective to have the ability to, and by the way, it's not just U.S., it is the whole community of peace-loving and free nations around the world need to have the ability to sense and track when weapons are launched, and then be able to track them, to be able to prepare defenses, whether they be, you know, space-based interceptors or ground-based directed energy means or traditional launching of fighter aircraft with weapons to intercept cruise missiles, as you all are doing every night when you come under attack from Russia's cruise missiles. It is that sensing layer that will absolutely be critical to whatever the end game for the final engagement of the attacking weapon system might be.
Let's also cover the situation in the Middle East. How can you assess the performance of both sides, Israel and Iran, in the air, in this air battle between Israeli and Iranian Air Force, between Israeli and Iranian air defense systems?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much a significant event because the Middle East has now entered a phase of open state-on-state warfare. Israel and Iran are no longer fighting through proxies. This is a direct war, as you, I think, accurately characterized it. It is, in fact, an air and space war involving long-range airstrikes, ballistic missiles, and others. Now, for Israel, this is existential. Its objective is not just to repel attacks, it's to terminate Iran's ability to build and field a nuclear weapon. So after years of Iranian escalation, nuclear brinksmanship, and proxy aggression, Israel's decided the time for preemption is now. And this is about ensuring that the most destabilizing regime in the region never becomes a nuclear power. Iran, on the other side, is fighting to preserve its regime. And the primary way it has stayed in power is because it's dependent upon the potential of it becoming a nuclear power. And so for 40 years, the Ayatollahs used delay, denial, and denunciation to secure a path to that objective. The difference is now he's lost some of his more capable military leadership that's informed the risk calculus in the past. And President Trump now sees the achievement of air superiority over Iran and the decimation of both Hamas and Hezbollah leadership, as well as Israel's successful air attacks, as signs that risks are markedly lower to U.S. forces now than ever before, should he approve military action. So that's how the strategic calculus has changed. And I'd share with you that so must the U.S. response. The United States has to reinforce nuclear deterrence. And so supporting Israel in its efforts to terminate Iran's nuclear capability is not merely a regional security issue, it's a strategic imperative that will dramatically improve global security and deter nuclear proliferation. So I know that's a lot of stuff, but it's extraordinarily important to recognize that in a world where adversaries like Iran seek to deny access with advanced air defenses, Israel's air campaign shows that the side that can dominate the air can dictate the terms of the battle. And that's a lesson every advanced military and every defense strategist needs to understand and internalize. Air superiority is not an optional condition in modern warfare. It's the foundation upon which victory is built. The only other point I want to throw in here, and because I think it's an important one and one your audience will find of interest, is it is important to highlight the spectacular performance of the stealth F-35 in achieving Israel's objectives. In fact, they could not have accomplished the success that they have without the stealth and situational awareness provided by the F-35. Those Israeli Air Force F-35s conducted the initial penetration missions that suppressed and then quickly eliminated Iran's air defenses, which, oh, by the way, are based on Russian weapon systems. And then they were able to gather real-time intelligence while their F-15s and F-16s followed on with heavy payloads for sustained bombings. I'm here to tell you, if Ukraine had a wing of F-35s, you would have already defeated the Russians. And perhaps in the future, F-35s will be part of the Ukrainian Air Force. It certainly should be.
We hope too, and also there are some critics, and were and still are some critics of this stealth technology of the F-35 fighter jets. However, does this recent performance of the Israeli Air Force over the Iran, does this mean that this stealth technology really works and Russia's air defense systems were not able to identify F-35s in the air?
Yeah, how about that? This is real world proof that of the significance of the capabilities that an aircraft like the F-35, what we call fifth generation aircraft, that is based not just on stealth, but also the sensor suite. So, you know, what I've told folks for many, many years is really the nomenclature, calling it a fighter is a little deceiving, because it's not just an F-35, it's an FBEA, RC, EW, AWC S-35. In other words, it performs all of these functions. It is a sensor as well as a shooter that can integrate all this information and apply it very effectively by penetrating contested airspace and then applying the appropriate effects for the particular situation at hand.
Let's cover also this air battle between Israel and Iran. For how long Iran is able to sustain these attacks? How long Iran can continue its missile attacks on Israel? Does Iran still have enough missiles to wage this war with such intensity? And what is the role of the Israeli air defense systems in this battle?
Again, it's a great question, and one that we see unfold every day. First, you know, I'll highlight right up front, there's a great big difference between the application of force that Iran's using and that Israel's using. Israel is using precise application of force against individual particular targets. Iran is using inaccurate barrages of missiles that are aimed against Israel's civilian population, not unlike what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. They're not, you know, they're trying to impose terror on the population. I mean, both Russia, in the case of its actions, its criminal actions against Ukraine, and both Iran, or along with Iran, against Israel. I mean, if you notice in the last 48 hours, actually, I think in the last 24 hours, they had a direct hit on a hospital. But back to your question. Yeah, at some point, even though they have a missile inventory in the thousands, I think the last statistic is reported from Israel is they've destroyed 40% of Iran's missile launch facilities, and that will over time improve. Iran will expend its missile inventory, so it's simply a matter of time before they run out and the weapons are taken away from them by Israel's precision attacks. They already cannot protect their airspace, which is an enormous advantage to Israel to conduct persistent attacks across the country. So you got a situation that, you know, all signs are pointing to the fact that Israel is going to dominate this military campaign, and in only a matter of weeks, Iran is going to be denuded of its capability to conduct its aggression against Israel.
Does this mean that Israel is winning this air war against Iran?
Absolutely. No question.
And also I wanted to cover with you the US military options in this conflict in the Middle East. According to Axios, US President Donald Trump is seriously considering direct military strikes on Iranian nuclear program. However, there are some concerns whether the US Air Force would be able to reach to this deep underground bunkers and to exactly destroy these underground nuclear facilities. What is your take on that? Would the US Air Force be able to completely destroy Iranian nuclear program deep underground, for example, in Fordo?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a great question. It's one people have been talking about. And the fact of the matter is destroying Iran's nuclear program is a very complex endeavor. First, the facilities are spread across the country. Some of them are deeply buried and heavily fortified in places like you just mentioned, Fordo. But the reason that's an important target is that's where Iran has 3,000 centrifuges buried 100 meters under a mountain protected by advanced air defenses. Second, there's the intelligence challenge. Israel, like Ukraine's got a pretty good intelligence service, collection of intelligence agencies, but still they may not know where all the facilities are, especially covert sites. I mean, Iran's been working really hard to hide what they've been doing. And you can't eliminate what you can't confirm. But I think that Israel's top-notch intelligence is laudatory, but even, let's just say, with 95% assurance, that remaining 5% may be critical. For example, where's the most highly processed uranium that Iran has produced located right now? And then third and finally, even a successful set of attacks, while delaying the program, they have to be paired with sustained pressure and a long-term strategy to prevent resurgence of a nuclear program. And you know, candidly, and I know there are people that wail and gnash their teeth over this, but that long-term strategy must ultimately include eliminating the current Iranian regime, because without doing that, the mullahs will just continue to pursue the elimination of Israel through the pursuit of nuclear weapons. Now, I'm not saying that that should be a primary objective. What I'm saying, and I'm not saying who should do that, ultimately, that's a decision that the population of Iran needs to make. But let's be realistic here. Now, it's a lot of stuff, but I wanted to get across to you the complexity of the entirety of getting rid of Iran's nuclear program. Back to your original question, can the United States, GBU-57, which is the 30,000 pound penetrating munition, you know, would that be effective against Fordo? And the answer is yes, but the devil's in the details. So what's the composition of the rock in the ground above those centrifuges? Because that's going to determine the number of weapons that have to be used. Nominally, the GBU-57 has a capability down to around 200 feet. Fordo's centrifuges are buried between 250 to 300 feet. So it's going to take more than one. But the way it can be done is, you know, you drop one, you fly a figure eight, you come back and you put a second weapon behind the first one. And if necessary, you put together tactics that it's followed by a third one or a fourth one. But there are ways, and I do believe it's within our capability to render that facility at Fordo ineffective. Now, look, there are other ways. I mean, they're riskier. They involve using special operations forces that, are inserted on the ground. And I won't go into all the details, but there are other means. And then there's a combination of both. So back to the importance of air superiority. This doesn't have to be something that is done, there's only a limited time window. Israel has now the advantage of time because it can go anywhere that it wants and stay as long as it wants over these Iranian nuclear facilities. So that's another option in terms of controlling the access to the facility. You take out the entryways, and then you just can, when you see them try to dig back in, you take them out again. So there are a variety of different options to deal with the centrifuges at Fordo.
Thank you, General Deptula, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
You bet. Keep up the great work, and thanks again for the opportunity to share some of my perspectives with your audience.
Thank you, General Deptula.